And as I said, because we don't have mic access obviously working for the audience, we'll have to limit the audience response. But if you feel strongly want to respond, we will repeat.
I would advise, it may look as if this microphone picks up from both sides. I don't think it does. It tends to pick up from this side. So if you do want to make a point, it may be best, rather than me having to repeat it, if you do want to come towards the front of the stage, and I'll point the microphone towards you. I don't think you need to come that close.
Okay. So can people hear me? Just
give a thumbs up. Can you hear?
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes. Okay.
I have to challenge the caller's premises too. I don't think that Muslim creationists in Europe have more power. I just think that they're more vocal than the Christian ones. I come from Austria, and we have a bunch of creationists. We actually had a meeting of Jehovah's Witnesses 1 or 2 years ago. There were 50,000 of them, which is quite a lot for Austria. There are a couple of think tanks in Germany, creationist ones. So I really, Christian ones obviously, and I really doubt that they have more power. But one thing that we talked about on the weekend is faith schools and how Muslim ones are really prevalent in England, and I think that's the main problem, why it seems that they have so much power and why they stay with their beliefs. And I think the video is going to be uploaded on YouTube, where we talked about the faith schools, and I think attacking the faith schools is the way to combat creationism in Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to come back on that?
I absolutely agree. It's about the schools.
Better education, that's always a solution.
We've heard that so many times over the course of the weekend, though, in so many different panels.
Well, especially the problem is when you have the Muslims showing up, and they all have their own schools, and they're all colleges, and they declare themselves to be educated. They think they've got a good education. Where do we put the metric? Because in Texas, we also have people that declare good educations, and they're coming from young Earth creationism schools.
Yes.
Can I just say something? Sorry.
Please do. Yeah.
I mean, I really think we should make a distinction between Muslims and Islamism. And I think that.
Would you like to come forward so people can actually hear you?
I'm from Texas. I don't know the difference, so you'll have to tell me.
If I just turn it around a bit, it should be able to pick you up.
Yeah, I mean, I really think we need to make a distinction between Muslims, people who have millions of characteristics other than their parents' beliefs or their own beliefs that define them, and Islamism, which is a political movement that uses Islam as a vehicle to railroad people and to bulldoze over society and civil rights and freedoms. I think oftentimes those words are interchanged, and I think we need to start being really careful about using the term Muslim, because Muslims could be free thinkers, could be, evolutionists, could be scientists. They don't necessarily like Islamism. They might be the first victims of Islamism. They're often resisting it. And in a way, if we start focusing on Islamism as a political movement, it helps us sort of see who the real enemy is. Education is crucial, it's important, but it is long-term. I think another important vehicle in battling Islamic creationism is battling the Islamic movement, which actually doesn't give a chance for children and people to think freely and to question and to learn about science.
I'm guilty of doing. Please just stay there, because I'm as long as you're comfortable. I obviously was guilty of doing exactly what you said should happen, and I refer to Muslims as opposed to Islam. Is the difference? An attack on Islam is attack on the religion, and attack on Muslims is attack on the person.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and also I think the problem is that Islamists do this. They often feign representation for all Muslims. They say we are representing 1 billion Muslims across the world, and they're not in reality. It's sort of, so in a sense, I think when we make the distinction, we make a distinction with Islamists who want Sharia law, who want veiling, who want creationism, versus people who might believe in Islam but might also be secularists and free thinkers as well.
If I'm allowed a follow-up question, I feel as if you're taking over the show, and rightly so, but if I could have a follow-up
I have a tendency
question...
to do that, sorry.
That's all right. I'm used to that. But one of the points that I've made previously is that when you're addressing a particular religion, for example, the Catholic Church, there is a easily identifiable, recognized hierarchy, ultimately ending up in the Vatican and the Holy Father. Their policies are also easily identifiable, and you could say the same of other Christian churches. One of the problems in addressing Islam is that you don't seem to have that level of hierarchy, and so it's much more difficult to address the issues. Do you think that is a fair comment?
Well, I mean,
if it is, how to go around get over that problem?
I think people often say that, and I think while there might not be a hierarchy similar to the church, for example, there is political power involved, and I think that's where you need to look at. I mean, the fact is that Islamism is a political movement. It has state power, and therefore it becomes easier then, if you look at it as a political movement, to see what you need to focus on and what you need to oppose, versus Muslims who often are immigrants or people in other countries that are fighting Islamism day in and day out, but yet we seem all of us to be bunched in with the Islamists. No matter how much we get killed and cry and scream that we have nothing to do with Islamism, that we hate it, it's sort of we all get bunched into one sort of bundle. And that's why I think we need to start separating the terms as a way of making it clear who the real enemy is. Islamism is the enemy, not Muslims.
Do you want to bring up thank you very much. Anyone on the panel want to come back on that? I think you.
I do have a comment. So one of the things going on here is this is exactly analogous to what's happening in the United States with Christians, and you could say exactly the same thing. That when you look at the United States, what you find is a majority of Christians who are the core of the belief, and then you have this thin veneer of the leaders of this radical movement who loudly protest that they speak for everyone. And what happens is, unfortunately, that we can't entirely excuse, if we use the same terms, Christianists and Christians, you can't entirely excuse the Christians and the Muslims, because what's happening there is that they go along with it. They say, okay, well, these people are representing my interests, and they're fighting for me, and therefore, I will identify with them and support them. And what we need is specific criticisms of that leadership, and we also need to find a way to split them apart and get the everyday Muslim, the everyday Christian to somehow realize that they can speak up too, and that they can represent a more moderate voice.
Yeah, one thing
before I come on to I'm sorry, you're back.
I'm horrible, honestly. Just kick me out after this. But
before you do, I can't remember your last name, please.
Mariam Namazi.
Thank you. Introduce yourself
to the audience. Which
means
prayer, actually, in Islam. I'm the opposite of that. But I mean, I get your point, and I do think people have to be held responsible for what they believe, and I think that's why I talk about the fact that we need to attack religion and we need de-religionization in society. But I think there's a distinction between Christians and Muslims because we're living under an Islamic Inquisition, and the fact that so many people who are Muslims or labeled as such don't necessarily have the freedom to say what they really think, And there are millions of examples of people who consider themselves Muslims, who defend women's rights, who defend children's rights, whatever, who are opposed to stoning, who face fatwas as a result. Yeah. And so in a sense, when people say, well, Muslims need to speak up more, I think, well, you also need to see the circumstances. A lot of people in Europe are afraid to speak up. So can you imagine people who are actually in communities where they're facing pressure and isolation and labels of blasphemers and apostates.
Yes.
So there is a bit of that.
What I'm suggesting is not that this isn't a thing saying, okay, blame the Muslims because they're not speaking up. I'm saying instead that what we need to do as an active response is to promote more more involvement by secular Muslims. So people like you, Taslima Nasreen, Ayan Hirsi Ali. We've got a lot of people who could represent the Muslims better, and what we need to do as you know, sort of the white, relatively Christian dominant majority is listen more to that voice, and not necessarily crazy people like this Sorceress character.
You know, in Texas, I can't get the common Christian to watch the Trinity Broadcast Network, which is a Christian broadcast channel. Most Christians will not watch. Most Christians will not watch the fundamental Pat Robertson, who claims to represent, you know, the Christian coalition of everybody, and everybody thinks, wow, that guy's a whack job. Yeah, he is, but he's speaking for you, and he's using your money, your donations, and your complacency. Your
right. And unfortunately, I don't think atheists are the right people to levy the criticism, because we're sitting here, they're going to see us as the enemy, and what we generally will do is polarize that mass of people who will generally go along with the leadership. And I think we've got a place, which is to encourage the growth of secularism and the growth of atheism, but we also need other people to balance us out.